What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Geek Pantheon, and I'm here with another D&D episode for you all. And for this episode, I'm going to be laying down my top 3 tips for running games for new players. Whether you're an experienced DM or a new DM, these are the 3 things that I think are most important to take into consideration when you have a table full of new players. I am currently running my home game is with a group that is not very experienced with D&D. So this is some of the things that I've been doing to really try and make the experience engaging for them without that initial buy-in of wanting to definitely play D&D and they're learning the game. And I've had conversations with people who told me they tried D&D once and they didn't like it. And so, that's fine. This hobby isn't for everybody. But based on what they've told me, there are some things that we as dungeon masters can do to allow them to be a bit more open-minded, to allow them to feel a bit more welcome at the table and in the hobby. So here are the 3 points that I think are most important, starting with point 0, which is session 0. Session 0 is very important most of the time. Some games do fine without one. My home game I'm running right now, I didn't have a session 0. But that's because I wasn't sure if it was going to be a campaign. There was a chance it was just going to be a one shot, and one of the players was then going to take over as dungeon master for a completely separate game that they were thinking about doing. Turns out they had a good time. They wanted to continue with those characters, so we continued. But there wasn't much of a point of having a session 0 for a one shot. So my home game didn't have one, but I would recommend it. If you know it's a campaign, if you know that you're going to be playing more than one time, a session 0 is a great thing to do. And you may not have heard of this term before if you're a new dungeon master that's watching this video trying to figure out how to run a D&D game for your friends that have never played either. And that's fine. I didn't hear this term until years into my DMing career. Um, but it's important for everybody to come together to meet, to discuss what type of game we're going to be playing. What type of characters do they need to make? Are they making pirates or noble heroes? And creating characters that work well together. You don't want a party full of clerics, or you don't want a party full of life clerics. Let me clarify, because there are subclasses and things like that to where you could have a party of a single class but still have a lot of diversity in that party. And you need to set up how the characters know each other. Because of the next point that I'm going to be making, it's really important for first time players that you just have that buy in, that all the characters know each other. They're there to work together. They don't need to be best friends, but they do need to know each other and be able to work together. Because of point 1, which is start in media res, start in the action. Kick off with a bang in the middle of things. If it's a pirate campaign, have them be crew members on a ship that is getting attacked. If it's a war campaign, start off in a battle. And it doesn't necessarily need to be threatening, but it does need to be engaging, whether it's horse racing, sparring, navigating a ship through storms if you don't want to do the whole pirate attack thing. But just something that gets them rolling dice, gets them engaged from the second you say, okay, let's play D&D. And in order for that to work well, it's a good idea to have all the characters know each other. And you go into this encounter with a ton of patience as the dungeon master, whether you have decades under your belt or this is your first time ever DMing. You need to have a lot of patience because they are learning the game on the fly. This encounter is probably going to take the longest of any encounter they do for the entire campaign because they are learning and you are teaching. You are a teacher in this moment. And if you start to get frustrated, they will too, and they're not going to like the game. So you need to come into this encounter with the right expectations, knowing that it is going to be slow. You're going to have to repeat yourself. You're going to have to explain the same rule multiple times because while you're explaining to the fighter how to roll an attack roll, the rogue is probably looking at their character sheet, trying to figure out what they can do, what weapons they have. And so by the time it gets around to their turn, they're going to be like, okay, now what do I do? Don't get frustrated in that moment. They're learning, they're trying to figure it out. Okay. And if you are comfortable as the dungeon master, I would take the narrative lead here in terms of describing actions. Really be vivid with your descriptions of what the characters are doing when they're swinging their swords, how they're swinging them. Because new players are going to get excited the first couple times just because of the numbers and the fact that, oh, I hit, yes. But that's gonna go away after a while. And if you've already set up of them being like, okay, I rolled a 15 plus 3, that's an 18, that's a hit. I hit. And you respond with, okay, so you take your longsword and you swing it overhand or overhead straight down into the kobold as it's staggering back from the magic missile that the wizard just hit it with, and you just slice it right through its armor as it lets out a wail. They're going to be much more engaged, and they're going to understand that that's the norm for D&D. And eventually they will take the reins. I'm not saying right away. I'm not saying after the first couple times that you've described it. Some players might just jump right on that and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this. But some players, it might take a session or two before they start to feel comfortable, or they may never feel comfortable. And that is fine. Because this game is different for everybody. But you need to start off taking the narrative lead, showing them that this is what D&D is about. If you just want to sit in a circle and roll dice, let's go play Yahtzee. But this is what it's about. It's about playing that role playing. It's about the narrative descriptions. It's about creating a story in your collective heads about what's going on. And you need to give them a lot of things to do in combat. And within reason, do not say no. And what I mean by that, one of the great things about D&D 5th edition is advantage, disadvantage. That is one of the greatest tools at your disposal as a dungeon master and allows you to say yes to so many different things. Like if your ranger has their bow out and the kobolds are attacking and they say, hey, if I climb up on that big rock there, would that like give me a better line of sight? Would I be able to hit that kobold better? Yeah. Why would you say no in that scenario? Say yes. Have them give you an athletics check to climb the rock as their movement, not as their action, because they want to attack. This is all in service of attacking. Athletics check as their movement to climb up the rock. Now they're up there. You have advantage on your roll. Roll twice and take the higher result because you thought creatively, because you were engaging with the environment, because you wanted to be a part of the world. You're not just sitting there saying, okay, I'm going to shoot my bow at him. You're doing more than that, so let me reward you as a dungeon master for that. Because for first-time players, you want them to be bought in. You want them to start thinking creatively and non-laterally. You want them looking around in their mind's eye and saying, oh, there's this here, there's this here. I'm going to hide behind these crates for cover. Can I do that? Sure. The enemies are going to have disadvantage when they try to hit you. I mean, that's fine. And I know that the game has rules for cover and partial cover and 3/4 cover. First-time players, I'm just going to say disadvantage. I'm going to keep it simple for them first session out. Because you can always add more rules on once they're comfortable with the game. But if you front load them with the rules and they don't want to play anymore, then your game's done. They're done playing this game. They're not going to join the hobby. So that's how I would do it. And also, it creates a sense of agency for your players. It makes them feel like they're in control. And that's, I think, why we all play this game. It doesn't have invisible walls like a video game. It doesn't have all these constraints. I want to go here. I want to do this thing. In D&D, you can do that. And as a dungeon master, you should allow that and encourage that. Because you can allow them to go wherever you want, and you can shift your narrative and your story around them to where they're still always walking towards the next planned encounter that you have. But they still have agency. They're still doing things that they want to do and not feeling railroaded by you. And especially for new players, I would encourage that. I would reinforce that behavior in them. Number 2, don't worry about the lore. Oh my gosh. This is a huge issue that I see with DMs that try to create their own worlds. Or DMs that are super excited about introducing a world. Like, I'm a big Eberron fan. My home group has never played a game in Eberron. So I'm super excited for them to play in Eberron and get to learn about the world. And I understand that you have spent hours, days, weeks, years coming up with this world, creating this thing or learning about this thing, and you want to share it with your players. But if you see yourself sitting down at your game table for session 1 with more than a couple paragraphs about your world, if you are sitting down with pages that you're going to read to the group before they can actually start rolling dice, you're going to turn people off from the game. If you're going to force your players to sit there for 45 minutes while you tell them about every single race and how they relate to each other and all the ancient empires and how the economy works and where all the major cities are, no, Don't stop that impulse, because that's not fun for them. It's fun for you, and you want them to have this information because it's things that their characters would know, and I understand that. But what you can do instead is during gameplay, when they ask a question like, "Oh, what's the deal with the dwarves?" "Oh, well, your character would know this, but," and then you tell them whatever is needed for them to know about the dwarves in that moment. "Oh, your character would know this, but," you're giving them the information and telling them your character would know this. So you don't need to make a check. You don't need to roll for it. Here is the information about my world that I've created. I hope you like it. And then if it's stuff that they wouldn't know, then they get a history check or whatever check you want to throw their way. But allow your lore to unfold before the players. Unveil it as you go along. Um, my home game, my Eberron campaign group. The only history that I've told them about in regards to Eberron is the morning in the last war. That's all they need to know. Some of them have read up on dragon marks and things like that on their own because they want to know about that stuff. But the only stuff that I've pushed on them is the last war and the morning, because that's all that's important to my campaign right now. Those are the only bits of history that play into the narrative I'm telling them right now. There's going to be more down the road, but I would love to discuss Aeronol with them. I would love to discuss Arganessen. I would love to tell them how amazing the chamber is and what a cool idea and what a cool part of the world it is. It doesn't matter for the game right now. If we want to sit after the game for hours with drinks in hand and talk about the world of Eberron or talk about the world that you've created and tell them all this cool stuff, that's fine. But after the game, not when they're excited to start rolling dice, they sit down and you pull out your um your thesis on your fantasy world. And the last point that I want to make is do not force role playing on anyone. Improv is a scary thing. Role playing is a scary thing. It is the number one reason I get from people that they do not want to play D&D or they don't like D&D is because they don't like the idea of talking in a voice and saying things off the top of their head that's not written down before where they can read it, and it's daunting. It's scary. When I first started playing D&D, I didn't want to talk in voices because I thought it was too much. I was like, no, that's beyond the pale. Now I do it all the time. But you have to let people get there because role playing freaks a lot of people out. And you might have some people at your table that are super excited about role playing and want to get into that. One of the people in my home game who has a lot of social ability stats like persuasion and deception and all those things are really high for her. And she was asking, "Yeah, all we've been doing is fighting. When are we going to get to the talking?" And I was like, and that was right before our next game. And I assured her, like, you are going to have opportunities to talk because I had actually planned on starting to introduce the more role play heavy, the more social type encounters at the third session. I think that's a good time to start introducing that stuff. First session in media res, crazy stuff is happening. Second session was a dungeon crawl, and they got a lot of lore. Second and third session, sorry, the dungeon took him 2 sessions to get out of. So fourth session, I introduced social encounters, but it was the third arc of our story, basically. Um, so if you have some people that are super excited to role play their characters, allow them to shine. Give them that opportunity. These will probably be the people that first take the reins on doing their own narration for their attacks or when they dodge an attack and things like that. Those are going to be the people that jump forward first. They're like, no, I got this. But don't shame the other players that don't role play. Even if you want the campaign to be role play heavy, do not shame anybody because role playing is different for every person. Some people role play by speaking in the third person and just describing actions. That is fine. Some people really get into it. They speak in the first person, and I am Dubis Bricklebrock, the dwarf fighter. And they get super into it. That's the way I am. I'm what's classified as an actor player. But do not shame anybody that is not the same way as you because they can be role play heavy. They can do a lot of role playing without once fading an accent, without once speaking in the first person. And with new players especially, you should not force that on them. If you are on session 9 or 10 and everybody's clearly bought into the game now, they want to be there, they're excited to continue playing, they love the game itself, and you would like them to be a bit more roleplay focused if they're getting a bit murder hobo-y for you, then it's fine to say, okay, guys, here was my intention with this campaign and what we kind of talked about. We talked about being nobles, spending a lot of time at court, but you all have been just going off into the wilds, attacking things, killing things, going hunting all the time. And I had planned a lot of really cool stuff around like courtly intrigue and speaking to people. Is that something you all are still interested in, or do I need to change the narrative that I'm trying to tell? And allow that to be a conversation. You can tell them, I would really like to do this noble intrigue thing, but I need you all to be a bit more role play heavy. Think about things from a non let's fight it standpoint. Once you're an established group and you've been playing for a while, that's totally fine. Session one or even session two, not okay. Because you're going to turn people off and you're going to make them think that it is a requirement of the game to play a certain way that they're not comfortable with. And that's simply not true. All right. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed this video. I hope it's helpful. Let me know down in the comments what you think about what I've said. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I 50-50? If you want to be a part of the conversation, you can head over to the Facebook group, the Geek Pantheon, or you can sound off down in the comments. We also have a Patreon. I would like to thank our show sponsors, who are Laura Pickren, Jessica Smith, Matthew Lewis, Irene Villarito, Daryl Delaney, Darren Katsko, Ryan Royce, John Carey, Nico Batson, the Cam family, Charles Compton. I think I might be missing somebody. If I did, I'm so sorry. But those are our amazing show sponsors that keep the lights on, along with all of our other amazing patrons. If you want to be a part of that community and engage with us that way, there's a comment or there's a link down in the description below, but it's patreon.com/the Geek Pantheon. Thank you all so much for watching. And once again, I am Eric.